Hey everyone, Harry Duran here, host of the Vertical Farming Podcast. Today's episode is a little different. It's a tribute to someone who was instrumental in shaping not just this show, but the entire industry of controlled environment agriculture. This week I learned of the passing of Dickson Despommier, the man many consider the godfather of vertical farming. And if you've been a long-time listener, you've heard me reference his book, The Vertical Farm, Feeding the World in the 21st Century, as one of the biggest inspirations behind this show. Reading his work back in December of 2019 completely changed how I thought about food production, sustainability, and the future of agriculture. Without his vision, I honestly don't know if I would have started this show. And I know I'm not alone. His ideas have inspired a whole generation of entrepreneurs, scientists, and advocates working to make vertical farming a reality. So today, I want to take some time to reflect on who Dickson Despommier was, how his work changed the game, and why his legacy will continue to shape the future of agriculture for decades to come. I'll also provide links in the show notes to some recent posts from those in the agtech industry that had the privilege of meeting and studying with him. You'll find those very inspiring as well. Dickson didn't start out as an agricultural expert. In fact, his background was in microbiology and public health. He was a professor at Columbia University, where he spent decades studying parasitic diseases. But what made him stand out was that he was a true innovator, someone who could connect seemingly unrelated fields to solve big problems. The idea for vertical farming actually came out of his work in the late 1990s when he and his students were brainstorming ways to solve food security issues in urban areas. The question that sparked it all: what if we could grow food in cities in a way that required no soil, less water, and no dependence on seasons? At this time, this was radical thinking. Most people believed that farming had to happen on traditional land in open fields. But Dickson saw the potential for cities to become self-sustaining ecosystems, producing their own food locally instead of relying on supply chains that stretch around the world. In 1999, Dickson and his students developed the first concepts of vertical farming, imagining skyscrapers filled with crops, hydroponic systems replacing soil, and cities feeding themselves sustainably. It took over a decade for these ideas to gain traction. The technology wasn't there yet, the funding wasn't there, but the vision was. His book, The Vertical Farm, published in 2010, was the turning point. It outlined not just the science behind vertical farming, but also the potential environmental benefits. Using 95% less water than traditional ag, growing food year-round, independent of climate conditions, eliminating the need for harmful pesticides, reducing transportation costs and carbon emissions. And since 2010, vertical farming has exploded into a multi-billion-dollar industry. We now see high-tech farms in major cities from New York to Singapore producing fresh produce in controlled environments. And Dickson's ideas help shape the companies and technologies we see today, many of whom I've interviewed on this show. Several even cite his work as an early inspiration. It wasn't just his scientific knowledge that made him influential. It was his ability to communicate complex ideas in a way that got people excited about the future. He appeared in countless interviews, documentaries, and conferences, spreading the message that vertical farming wasn't just an option, it was a necessity for the planet's survival. He was also a mentor to many in the industry. And if you ever had a chance to hear him speak, you know he had this infectious energy, this belief that if we put our minds to it, we could completely redefine how humanity grows food. So flashback to December 2019. One of my podcast clients at the time gifted me the book Abundance by Peter Diamandis. In there was a reference to Dickson's book, The Vertical Farm, which I immediately purchased and downloaded to my Kindle. I read the book in one sitting. I was fascinated by the intersection of sustainability, technology, and storytelling. And here was this guy laying out a vision that was bold, inspiring, and completely ahead of its time. I started the Vertical Farming Podcast because I believed that more people needed to hear about this movement, that the ideas in Dickson's book weren't just theoretical, but were actively shaping the world. Over the past 5 years, I had the privilege of speaking to over 150 CEOs and founders of the leading vertical farming companies from around the world. And I feel this show is an extension of Dickson's legacy, as it was one of the major catalysts for me starting it. I believe that's the mark of a true visionary. He didn't just create something, he inspired thousands of others to bring his vision to life. And though he's no longer with us, his work is far from over. Vertical farming is still in its early stages, and there are challenges: energy costs, scalability, long-term viability, many of the topics and considerations we've discussed on this show. But if Dickson taught us anything, it's that big ideas take time to become reality. And now it's up to all of us, the researchers, the farmers, the entrepreneurs, the investors, the podcasters, to keep pushing forward, to take the torch and build on his legacy, to continue the conversations, to educate more people about why vertical farming matters, and to innovate, experiment, and create the sustainable food systems of the future. Because at the end of the day, the world needs more people like Dickson Despommier. visionaries who dream of a better future and have the courage to chase it. I appreciate you listening and watching to this special tribute episode, and I hope it gave you a sense of just how important and influential Dickson Despommier was, not just to me, but to this entire industry. If his work has inspired you in any way, I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or any of the socials, or email me, harry@verticalfarmingpodcast.com. Let's keep his vision alive by continuing the conversation and sharing his ideas. And if you haven't read The Vertical Farm, I recommend picking up a copy. Even now, it remains one of the most visionary books on sustainable ag ever written. I'll provide a link in the show notes. Rest in peace, Dr. Despommier. Your work lives on. And until next time, stay curious, stay innovative, and keep growing.